feel like today, was such a special occasion for me and for the women especially, because women have not been allowed to chant in the temple for the last 30 years. But they were allowed to chant in the temple previous to that time. And they were a part of the 24-hour kirtan when it began. Was it in 1975 that Dhananjaya, 76?
I'm not exactly sure at which date and which time the 24-hour kirtan started, but it did start then with Srila Prabhupada present, and that was very soon. So when I came, it was just the temple had been open a few months, and the 24-hour kirtan was going on. And, as I said, there wasn't many of us, so we all had to, put in our time. There was no question of who was going to do it. Everybody was going to do it.
Well, it was Prabhupada's instruction when the temple opened. He wanted 24-hour kirtan, and it was going on from that time. And automatically, the women were just included. So if you came to Vrindavan, you were asked to go in the Mataji's kirtan.
I mean, the 24-hour kirtan did end at some point. I know it just kind of fizzled out, probably after Srila Prabhupada left the planet. I can't remember, but which is a shame. But it was very austere. There weren't a lot of devotees that stayed all year, as I said. It wasn't like it is now, where you've got piles of devotees and 24 hours electricity. We were living very basic lives.
So that, plus the fact that I wanted to do it anyway, the 24-hour kirtan. Then Nandarani left, and then I just couldn't do it alone. So then I kind of asked him, please, you find a boy to do my spot. And he was very happy to take over the 24-hour kirtan, and that was in 1985.
think that's important for everybody to know, because a lot of devotees, especially the ones that aren't Prabhupada disciples, and maybe a lot of the Prabhupada disciples know it, but the ones that aren't don't know that women were chanting in the temple here in Vrindavan, and Prabhupada was here, and it was okay. It was fine. Pradyumna and I, we were actually supposed to go to Vrindavan in 1971, and we were on our way to Vrindavan with a whole group that was going at that time. And we got as far as Berry Place, and somehow things didn't work out. So things weren't working out so well with me and him. And I ended up going back to the States, and he ended up going to India. Prabhupada wrote a letter to me. This was in 1972, and he said, "Your husband is with me now, and he will remain with me always to help me with the Sanskrit on my books." So it was kind of a shock when I got that letter. Eventually it turned into a blessing. And so whenever Prabhupada, since Pradyumna was, from that point on, he was traveling with Prabhupada. And so whenever they would come to the States, I would always go wherever they are, so I would see both Prabhupada and Pradyumna. And so eventually, in 1974, Srila Prabhupada came to New Dwarka, Los Angeles, and I was not doing very well at the time. And Prabhupada asked Pradyumna, "How is your wife?" And he said, "She's not doing so well, Prabhupada. She's smoking." So I had fallen down a bit. I was smoking cigarettes. And he said, "Tell her if she stops smoking, she may come to Vrindavan." And then he asked, "What does she like to do?" And Pradyumna said, "Well, she sings a lot. She likes to lead kirtan." He said, "Tell her if she stops smoking, she may come to Vrindavan and sing all day in front of the deities." Haribol.
Srila Prabhupada initiated the 24-hour kirtan, and he did not say men or women, because in those days everybody just joined together and participated. So there was a slot. There was always a slot for the women, and mainly it was the men. You've got to remember that there weren't that many devotees living in Vrindavan at the time. You know, there'd be a lot for the festival, but not so many afterwards.
I lived in Vrindavan from April 1976 until the mid-80s. I went out, I think, once, sometime in the early 80s. When I came to Vrindavan, it was expected that you would take part in the 24-hour kirtan. That was part of your service. Srila Prabhupada had started the 24-hour kirtan, and at that point it had kept going, I understand. I used to chant with the ladies in the afternoon when Arundhati was here. But don't forget, I was here for a long time, so I can't remember what years I did what. But when Arundhati was here, we'd all go and chant with her. It was like the most wonderful experience. Everyone wanted to join in.
I came to Vrindavan just after the opening in 1975. I came in the summertime I think I came in May, so it's a very, very hot time, very quiet time. And, the temple was very small, actually, because everyone had been focusing on building the temple. And the people who had built the temple were so tired and so finished by the time it was open that most of them were ready to leave. So the GBC left a few people here. Everybody had to kind of send somebody. They had to have a pujaris, they had to, so many things to keep this going. There was no real temple, and there was no real funding or structure or anything. So I arrived into the midst of that kind of confusion, and most of us were all new to India. It was extremely austere, and we simply did not know how to live here. So everyone was getting sick. Hepatitis, malaria, typhoid, you name it. Everyone was getting sick. And but we were in bliss. It was extraordinary, and I loved it. I loved being here. I always wanted to come to Vrindavan, and I was so happy. But it was very hard. We'd go in to cook in the kitchen. There's nothing there to cook with. We have to cook on coal stoves, and that heat, and no fans, no electricity. It was tough. But, we were young and resilient, and it was exciting also.
Well,
so far as the 24-hour kirtan goes, I believe that started in 1975. Srila Prabhupada said that we should do 24-hour kirtan. And it began then, but I don't think it was like, it really like took flight yet. But then, I believe it was in 1977 that Srila Prabhupada was ill, and he said that we should, really seriously engage in chanting 24 hours a day, and we should have set people the chant, either 2 hours or 4 hours. So, everybody had their turn. So the women at that time got a chance to be a part of the 24-hour kirtan.
I came in 1976 in about June. It was very hot, and at that time we had the afternoon slot. I just can't remember if it was 2 hours or 1 hour, but it was either 2 to 4 or 3 to 4. And I remember going down every day, and that was our slot. And at the time, some of the girls were sick. Sometimes I would just be there myself, or sometimes there'd be 2 or 3 of us, or 4 or 5. There weren't many of us doing it because in those days it was just sort of to keep it going, kind of, And the same with the men. At night there might be just 1 person or 2, It wasn't like now where there's many, many devotees, but we just wanted to keep it on because Prabhupada wanted the 24-hour kirtan.
We had a small group. I was the leader of that group of women, and we chanted in the temple each day. I believe that the timing actually was around 2:30 to 4:30. I may be a little bit off, but what I remember is that towards the end of the spot that we had in the temple, we did see the deities. We had darshan of the deities. So I think the darshan, the curtains opened maybe in the last 15 minutes that we were chanting. So we chanted 2 hours a day, and we had some space of time where we were actually chanting in front of the deities.
If I recall correctly, Dhananjaya was the temple president at that time, and his wife Balagopal, and I had known them from maybe England. Yeah, probably met them in England. And so the time, as you can imagine, the slot that was the most difficult to fill was midnight to 3 in the morning, or I'm pretty sure it was like 12 to 3, something like that. And so Dhananjaya volunteered to do that, being an exemplary temple president. So him and his wife, I don't know if there's anybody else, but I joined in on that. So I think it was more like that the householders or the ladies, any ladies that were here, they had their slots together, and then there would be some men and some brahmacharis and whatever. So, but we worked it out. There was no real trip about it, it just seemed what was natural,
I also, before I married, so like in 1976, 77, I also had the 9 till 10 spot at night. That I did on my own. Sometimes someone would join me, but 9 till 10 was my spot. And that's what we did. It was part of our service. Being in Vrindavan meant that you also took an hour in the 24-hour kirtan. As Ambika mentioned, there weren't many people here then. It wasn't like there were piles of us like today. I mean, in those days, not many people stayed the whole year.
Now, as far as we did a little bit later on, Arundhati and Madeira, my god sisters, who are musicians and good singers, good harmonium, mridanga. Now, as far as mridanga playing went, by that time, most of us knew one beat, whatever was Prabhupada taught, you know, and then, you know, you might embellish it a bit. So I knew that, you know, and got good at embellishing. For those days, it was pretty good. Like now it would be a joke, you know, people really know how to play mridanga now, you know. But I loved playing mridanga. I absolutely loved it. And Madeira she was much better than me. She had actually she'd been in Delhi because her husband Tejas was basically the sole financer of his collections were maintaining the Vrindavan temple. And so she was in Delhi, super austere for her. She's a very young girl, and but she loved to play the drum. So when Prabhupada came one time, I mean, the temple was the size of just smaller than this room. I mean, it was a hole in the wall. The temple, it's a misnomer. But she was playing in the temple room. She was playing the mridanga and singing. And Prabhupada was in the next room. And his servant was watching Prabhupada, and Prabhupada had stopped whatever he was doing, and he had his eyes closed. And he was listening to her play. And then he smiled and he said, "Who is playing?" They said, "Oh, that's Tejas's wife, Madeira." And he went, "Just like a gopi." So that would, you know, kept Madeira going for a few years, knowing Prabhupada really appreciated.
And, you know, we just had a wonderful, very small group. Most of the time I was leading the kirtan, but occasionally other women came, you know, that actually led, like Madeira came from Delhi and she would lead sometimes. Sitala played the mridanga for the most part. She had a very good voice, but she played mridanga and she didn't usually lead the kirtan. And actually I do have an old recording of the kirtan that we did. It's not, the quality is so-so. But it was very, very blissful. Chanting every day, that few hours every day that we chanted, it just made it wonderful for everybody. You know, we were all like very balanced because we were doing the kirtan every day. We were in good shape.
So I do recall those late night kirtans as something so extraordinary, and I'm so grateful to have had that time. Now, I mean, I don't know how long I did it. You know, it wasn't ages, but, you know, some months. Because I was not a permanent resident here, I had come to do some service for European temples, getting deities made, getting outfits made, doing some seva. So I was here for some months. But what I remember is the extraordinary feeling of being in the temple room with no distraction, no disturbance, no other sounds, and just singing to the Lord in the middle of the night in Vrindavan. I mean, I don't think there could be anything much more mystical and magical as that. It was beautiful, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it, and somehow, I don't know, it didn't seem difficult to do it during the middle of the night.
Oh, it was very ecstatic to be able to sit in the temple and chant for the deities. We loved it. We both loved it. We tried to learn different tunes. There was one boy in the Gurukula named Kunja Bihari, and his father was a very famous kirtaniya from Canada. So he learned so many kirtans from his father, and then Nandarani got Kunja Bihari to teach us. So we learned many different tunes from him. And just to sit in the kirtan and in the temple and sing all these different tunes. It was very ecstatic. We loved it. But as I say, in those days there were not so many devotees. We couldn't get people to come and join us. So it didn't last.
So we had an interest. We became like a little group. Me, Madeira, Arundhati was Panditji, Pradumna's wife, and Madeira was Tejas's wife, and I was on my own then. And so we had a real interest in kirtan and in singing together. We really became like a bonded group, So we used to sing. We had a time. We actually sang before the evening 7 o'clock arti in front of the deities, the three of us. We had like 2 hours, actually, that we used to sit in front of the deities, and the three of us, and of course other people would join us. But that I recall as some of the best times in my life, because we were just so into it. We were so into kirtan. And learning what we were into, learning the authentic Bengali tunes, because we all really liked that, and we didn't like what do you call it? The Western way of playing, with harmonies and chords, chords and harmonies and stuff. And not that we did, but we preferred. Let's put it that way. We preferred to learn these kind of traditional Bengali tunes. So wherever there were Bengali singing, then we'd go and we'd record. Remember, we used to go down to the Radha Vallabh temple late at night. There'd be these really old men that would sing, and with the Esraj, and I mean, it was just incredible. But we had this interest of learning the traditional tunes, often with 3 parts, 2 or 3 parts to them, and we'd practice, and it was just lovely. It was really, really nice.
And I also remember one devotee joined. Her name was Bhaktin Sheila. She had a boy called Nathan. She's now called, oh God, it's gone out of my head, Sachasara. Her name's Sachasara. She's in the Alachua community. And her spot, they gave her the night spot, like midnight till, it was some late spot at night. And what would happen is no one would show up to relieve her, and there was nothing she could do. Sometimes I think she even went and knocked on brahmachari's doors. I'm not sure. You'd have to check with her. But she used to end up chanting most of the night because no one would relieve her. So that's another story of a woman that was in the 24-hour kirtan. But definitely, there was no question of that we didn't chant. I think there was maybe less emphasis on this whole gender problem. I think we have to really work on understanding that we're souls.
But I'm happy that I had the opportunity to do that and have such an amazing experience. And I asked Madhava once, who everyone knows, the kirtan man, how did he learn to focus the way he focuses? I mean, it's astonishing to see him, that he can sit. I mean, he's a yogi, a real bhakti yogi, for hours and hours. And he said it was from doing those he did for years. he did 4 or 5 hours every night. So he said that practice, because there is no distraction and you're just singing to Krishna. So what a wonderful thing, what a wonderful practice.
After Srila Prabhupada left his body, I didn't say that I had started traveling on Srila Prabhupada's party in 1976. He invited me onto his entourage to transcribe his tapes because he wanted to do a great deal of translation work at that time. So he wanted somebody specifically to do that service. And Pradyumna was already traveling with him. So I was fortunate to get that service. And he invited my son, who was just a little boy at the time, 6 years old, he invited him to come along as well, because I had recently taken him out of the Gurukula. So Prabhupada said, Aniruddha can come too on the traveling party. So during the time that we were traveling with Prabhupada, that's when he became very ill. I think it was in 1977. So that's, when we really got into the 24-hour kirtan. I forget what month it was. I lived personally, after Prabhupada left, I stayed on because in Vrindavan and did a service at Radha Damodar Temple, cooking an offering for Srila Prabhupada each day, a lunch offering. And Pradyumna had actually been named by Srila Prabhupada to complete the translation of Srimad Bhagavatam after Prabhupada left. So he was working on that at Radha Damodar, and I was cooking the offering, and then in the afternoon would come back here and do the kirtan with the few women that we had. You know, maybe it was like, sometimes it was just like 3 or 4 of us, sometimes 8 or 10, you know, depending. It wasn't usually a huge group of women because there wasn't that many women here in Vrindavan at that time. But we kept it up, you know, and I was here in Vrindavan through 1979, I think maybe the summer of 79, and then we had to leave Vrindavan. So I'm not quite sure what happened after that, you know, in terms of the 24-hour kirtan. I believe that it stopped at some point, that somehow the devotees couldn't continue it on, and then I think a few years later Ayendra came and he began the 24-hour kirtan again. So that's kind of in a nutshell how I was involved with the kirtan.
Well, personally, why we stopped is just because of change of, you know, Madeira was back in Delhi, and Arundhati went somewhere, and I went back to Europe, and, you know, so as far as us as a group, we just, whenever we could get together, we would, but it was sort of over that we were all together here during a certain time. So that faded away, and it just didn't seem that there were any other, we were the ladies that were doing it at that time, and nobody seemed to like fill the gap then, you know, nobody kept doing it. So what happened exactly, I don't know. I mean, then of course Ayendra came, and I don't even know when that was, maybe it was 82 or 84 or something, I don't know. And obviously the 24-hour kirtan had dwindled and had trouble continuing, and then from his point on he really, you know, firmly established everything. So and I understand the strategy, how probably, I can only speculate, I never asked him, but how difficult it might have been to, because I remember what it was like, you know, getting people to be there on time and everything, so you had to have access to the people. So as things grew here, you know, householders live all over the place, and ladies live all over the place, far away. So somebody doesn't come for the kirtan, you have no control over it, and it's very hard. It's hard thing to keep going. So I mean, basically it became like the brahmachari thing and the kirtan men thing.
Okay, I'll first say that I first came to Vrindavan in 1985 from the Bombay temple, and I joined the service in the Gurukula. So at that time there was some kirtan going on in the temple, but it was not fully 24-hour kirtan, it was sometimes. And some people were doing it whenever they felt like it. Then I had one god sister there named Nandarani, and she was in the Gurukul, she was a nurse. And we tried to do like 2 hours of the 24-hour kirtan ourselves. We picked a timing, it was sometime in the afternoon, and we had 2 hours that was our 2 hours when we did that kirtan. We tried to engage other ladies to come with us, but in those days there were not so many devotees, and everyone was so engaged. We couldn't get more ladies. But there was no problem. Nobody cared, nobody objected. We were ladies, but we were there, we had our timing, and it was very ecstatic for us. But then Nandarani, after some time, she became so engaged. She was a nurse in the Gurukul, and she had so much to do. She came to me one day and said, I really can't do the kirtan anymore. Aditya, you find someone else to do it with you. And so I went around, and all the girls didn't have any time, and I started doing it alone. and I'd sit in there alone, and it was not very encouraging to be all alone, just doing kirtan all alone in the temple.
However, I do understand how after time it did become hard. It is a hard thing to maintain, to keep something going all night long, all the time. Because what would happen, which I saw, like, okay, it's 3 a.m, where's the next crew? And very often the next crew didn't show up, and we'd be pretty tired by that time. So you'd have to go running off to try to find the next person. And, or you'd arrive at midnight and there'd just be one devotee kind of slapping his kartal on the ground, half asleep, more than half asleep. So, it's not an easy thing to maintain over time. So I could understand how, after some years, it came to be that, it was really just the people that were living in the temple. Because if the next crew was somebody that lived in, Tapuria house or the Goshala or, somewhere, what were you going to do? It was just practicalities,
Another thing I wanted to say was that, meanwhile, just when Ayendra Prabhu was coming to Vrindavan at that time, Kirtanananda Swami had an accident in New Vrindavan. Someone had hit him on the head and cracked his head. So all the devotees were asked, all over the world, they were asked to pray for him and do kirtan for him in the temple. And that's kind of hard how the 24-hour kirtan started up again because of Kirtananda Swami. Everyone wanted to come in and take part of that. So that, plus the fact that Ayendra wanted to do it anyway, the 24-hour kirtan. So one day I went to Ayendra. Ayendra had just, I'll go back a little bit, Ayendra had just come to India. And he had an idea in his mind that he would be in charge of the 24-hour kirtan that had almost stopped, and it really had. And Nandrani, she was a very powerful personality. She went to him and said, "We are ladies, but we're doing it already, so we will keep doing it." And he didn't argue with her. So that was how we got to do it, actually, even though he didn't object. He just let us do it. Then after a while, she couldn't do it anymore, and then I didn't feel encouraged to do it anymore. I went to him one day. I said, "Ayendra Prabhu, I really can't do the kirtan every day all alone. And maybe you have to put a boy there in our timing." And he said, "Oh." He turned his head away and he said, "Very good."
I would like to ask you both the very last question. If it was Srila Prabhupada's foundation and it was his desire that all the devotees, Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis, must participate in the 24-hour kirtan, why was Ayendra Prabhu was against it?
I've no idea.
Brahmachari and, a little bit, he was fanatic about it. I don't know, he just kind of took possession of it because he restarted it after it had kind of petered out.
I think
so
it
he
did.
kind of felt like it was his thing, and somehow or another he was happy not to include the women. And then it's sort of become a tradition since then. So just recently we had during the 5-day festival, we had an hour and a half and we were able to chant in the temple. But to get that, Rundati had to go to about 3 different meetings and really push. So yeah, she had to really make a big, strong, fuss about the women doing it. So that's not very good. They should be able to be included in the 24-hour kirtan as they were in Prabhupada's time.
I think Mataji Kusha will work at this problem.
Yes, she's working on it. Good on her.
Because when I asked Ayendra Prabhu 7 years ago, he told me that he founded this Samadhi Mataji Kirtan in order, he told that Matajis also need to realize themselves in chanting the Hare Krishna mantra and in preaching. and he was trying by all means to maintain it, although there are a lot of opposition at that time. But when I asked him, or is he against it or something like, no, he said, I'm for it. But I don't like when Matajis are singing with the microphone, because they try to sing very loudly, and when the Matajis are singing, the Brahmacharis are falling down.
Oh.
And I think that he was very strict because he saw a lot of disturbances among the Prabhujis. You know, it's the constant problem in material world.
And I don't know how it kind of got written in stone or something, but one thing that I do think people should understand is it's certainly not wrong to have the ladies doing the kirtan there. I don't know how that became established, because it wasn't in Prabhupada's time. Prabhupada never made that standard, nor did he enforce it. And on the contrary, he sent Arundhati here to do kirtan in front of the deities, and he very much appreciated when he saw Madhura and others. I mean, he invited, Jamuna, history is there, that there's absolutely nothing wrong or inferior about having the ladies do kirtan anywhere at any time. However, I do understand that it may be a practical managerial decision that it's better that they're not doing the 24-hour kirtan here, because it would be very difficult to maintain it. It would be. So it's just should be clear, because some people have a misunderstanding that, you know, that it's wrong, it's bad, it's inappropriate for the ladies. That is not, that's a fallacy. But whether it's more practical for them to do how it wound up becoming as it is, I can understand how it went in that direction. It was practical, but not because it's wrong to do it another way or lesser, or, you know, you shouldn't hear the voice of a lady or something like that. Because that wasn't Prabhupada's mood. It wasn't Prabhupada's mood. So, yeah.
Srila Prabhupada, he didn't make any distinctions about men or women, and that's really important for us to know. You know, he didn't say only the men can chant in the temple. That wasn't his instruction. So I think it's important for all of us to know that he was, as I said earlier on, that Srila Prabhupada said that I could come to Vrindavan and chant all day in front of the deities. So, as well as we know about Jamuna, that Srila Prabhupada had her sing every morning, and still does every morning, singing the prayers, Govindam prayers. So he didn't make a distinction about that. I remember such a long time ago, Srila Prabhupada came to Columbus, Ohio in 1969. I had just gotten married there, and he was teaching us this bhajan that we all do, Jeev Jago, wake up, sleeping souls. So he wanted us to learn the chant, and he was having women sing it. I was one of those women that he was having us to learn it. You know, I would lead it, and somebody else would lead it, and we would all follow. So we would learn how to sing it. So anyhow, the important thing is that Srila Prabhupada didn't make these distinctions that sometimes some devotees are making, because we're not this body, and we really need to understand that we're not this body. We're all devotees of Krishna. We're spirit souls. So I believe wholeheartedly that Srila Prabhupada wants the women to have as much opportunity to serve and to utilize their talents in Krishna's service. So I don't think everybody should know that Srila Prabhupada was completely supportive of the women doing whatever service that they were able to do.
The thing with this whole thing about men being agitated by women and women being agitated by men, I mean, it's a two-way track. We're all in the material world. Is that you cannot blame the other person for your desires.
Yes.
You have to own your desires, own whatever your problem is and work on it. You can't blame everyone around you for your problems.
And also I know that, the Govindam prayers we hear every morning all around the world. Jamuna, a Mataji, is singing. And one of the men, I don't know who it was, made up a tape of them singing the Govindam prayers and sent it to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said, how many ways can I say it? N-O, no. Why do you always want to change things? And I know that when he first heard her singing in Los Angeles, when they sent that tape to Prabhupada, he was on the Vyasasan, and when he heard Jamuna, he started to cry, He loved that tape. So, it's not a question of gender. If someone's singing with devotion to Krishna, how can it make someone fall down? It's a shame.
Maybe the Matajis who were singing that time were not at a very high level, and there were a lot of lust in them. But the material world is penetrated with the lust, so we must work with our problems and qualities.
I think that the devotees that were doing the 24-hour kirtan were doing it, with as much Krishna bhakti as they could muster. I don't think that there was... And at the time, actually, we did not have a microphone. We were just singing. There was no microphone set up for us in the women's group.
I don't think there was at night,
No, there was no microphone. We just sang in the temple.
Maybe in the daytime, but there wasn't at night. Don't forget, even if there wasn't a microphone, would we have electricity? Things were different then. We didn't have electricity a lot of the time. Our facilities were very limited. But the main thing is it's a Maha Mantra.
That's right.
So far as the women chanting, the Matajis chanting, there's no, as we know, there are no hard and fast rules for chanting the holy name. There's no specific way. Srila Prabhupada said that we're all individuals and that we can make up our own tunes. He was all right with that. And we don't need to chant in any specific way. Just the important thing is to chant from the heart. That's the most important thing so far as we don't need to chant like the man or chant in any, it needs to be sincere and from the heart. That's the most important. thing.
But I think it's important that we start to see one another as, eternal spirit souls instead of all this godly concept stuff, which doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help anyone.
It simply create extra disturbance.
It focuses on the problem, on that problem. It doesn't have to be there. It amplifies something that doesn't have to be there.
Well, also, if you think you're a man and you're entitled to so many things because you're a man, that's just an attachment, isn't it? It's not good. It's not good, if you're thinking, I'm a man and so I'm entitled. How can that be good for you?
Nothing good.
This entitlement is a problem. This feeling that you're entitled to certain things is going to be an obstacle as well on the path of devotional service. Anyway. When Prabhupada left, we had regular bhajans at Srila Prabhupada's Samadhi. So it was, those were wonderful times where we had a group that was really into trying to do the authentic Bengali way of kirtan, which I still prefer to anything, although, kirtan's kirtan. Well, Prabhupada left, yes, but still the Samadhi was there. So even though the Samadhi was not built, but there was a small structure there. So from the time that Prabhupada departed, we had kirtans there. There were often kirtans going on, even in that tiny little small structure, while construction went on for years and years. But kirtan was still there. Prabhupada's arti was going on, and the seva was going on to Prabhupada. We didn't wait until the samadhi was finished. It took 20 years or something to finish the samadhi. So kirtan was going on and the seva was going on even when there was nothing there. The day that Prabhupada left, then there was just a, tulsi pot there and a little fence around. But still we had kirtan there.
Когда я впервые приехала во Вриндаван,
When I first time came to Vrindavan, most of all, I was attracted by kirtans here. Kirtans in Srila Prabhupada's Samadhi were held irregularly, but on one of such wonderful days, on the day of the appearance of Lalita Devi, it was 2007, the disciples of Srila Prabhupada asked all the Matajis to come together and sing for the pleasure of Srila Prabhupada and Krishna. And we got together. It was an unforgettable day. We sang for several hours. The next day, they asked me to make it my main service to come to Samadhi Srila Prabhupada for chanting every day. I think this is the most amazing service I ever had. and still every day we sing regularly. The theme periodically changes, but the essence remains. We all gather and sing. So we invite everyone because it's an amazing opportunity for Matajis to gather and sing for Srila Prabhupada in Vrindavan. I believe that this is the holiest place at the feet of Srila Prabhupada, and here we can chant the holy name.
Я помню тот удивительный день, когда ученицы
I remember
Прабхупады
that amazing
нас
day
пригласили
when the
в
disciples of
Баларам
Srila Prabhupada invited us to Krishna Balaram Mandir to join kirtan.
Это было
It was an
незабываемое
unforgettable
впечатление.
experience.
Мы очень благодарны
We
за
are
такую возможность.
very grateful for such an opportunity that we sang before the deities in a temple, and perhaps sometimes this opportunity will also be given to us to lead a kirtan in Krishna Balaram Mandir. Chanting the holy name is the Yuga Dharma, and we are very, very happy that we have the opportunity to come together to sing the holy name in Vrindavan.
When we all chant together, I think one of the main things is that the differences that devotees often have go away. You know, they're not there when we're all chanting together. The chanting is a unifying factor. We forget about all our differences at that time. We're not fighting with each other that it should be this way and it should be that way. We're just all gathered together and chanting the holy name, and that the holy name is it is Krishna. The holy name, Krishna is chanting on our tongue. He's right there. So it's the prime benediction for humanity. So it's a wonderful opportunity. It's much different from japa. Some people maybe only want to do japa. That's their choice. But there's a very strong heart connection that happens with everybody when they chant together. So it's very unifying, heart-opening experience. So it's highly recommended, and it's Lord Chaitanya's. Yeah, this is Lord Chaitanya's movement to do Sankirtan, congregational chanting of the holy name. So we're following Lord Chaitanya, and it is a great benediction that we've gotten this opportunity to do that service for humanity. We had a kirtan today, and I think the women were very happy to chant in the temple after all this time. It was history in the making after all these years that we could do that. And hopefully it will happen some more by Srila Prabhupada's mercy and desire.